Hello everyone and welcome to this Adobe Illustrator tutorial where today I'll be introducing what Adobe Illustrator is and also why it is most commonly used, okay? So Adobe Illustrator is most commonly used to create logos, icons, infographics, and technical diagrams for printing and also web use. Illustrator's vector drawing capabilities make it ideal for creating the smooth curves, bright colors, and clean transitions found in these types of art. In this course, we'll use Illustrator to first make a landscape illustrations. We will also use Illustrator to make some basic logos, and also in the process of working through these projects, we'll gain familiarity with these tools most typically used to create artwork in Illustrator. We'll start off with a short tour to the Illustrator interfaces and then set up our workspace to help us work more efficiently in Illustrator, okay? So let's start now. Okay, now before I start, I want to tell you that you must be sure that you're using the most current version of Illustrator, okay? While you'll be able to complete many of the exercises in this course, using other versions of Illustrator, your interface may look different than what's shown in this course. If you're working with an earlier version of Illustrator, you may want to update your software to the latest version for the best experience. Okay, now first let's go ahead and explore the interface. Now after you load up Illustrator, you'll be greeted by the software which says welcome to Illustrator, and then you can either create a new file, open a new file, or you just select home over here. As you can see, since I haven't signed in, these are the only options I will have. Okay, so now what I'll do is basically go over here on top on the menu bar. As you can see here, we have a couple of options to choose from, and then here we have the AI logo, which will take me to a window over here as soon as I click on it. Okay, now let's go over here and again we'll go to the interface. So let's cut it. Okay, so now we're back here, and the first thing you would actually do when you open Illustrator is basically click on this new file over here, or you can click on open over here if you want to open any previous files. Now I'll select the new file option, and then you'll see we have a pop-up dialog box over here saying new document, and over here we have a couple of information given to us for our preset details. Now I'll go through each one of them right now. First, we have the name for our document. Okay, let's go over here and type in the Illustrator Interface. Okay, now afterwards, what you'll see is that we have the width of our artboard and the height of our artboard that we want to make, and over here we have points. The points, pixels, and picas are basically all of the measurements that you can select your art to be in. Okay, so for now I'll just select inches. Okay, now after selecting inches, you will see that our width has been randomly confirmed. Our width and height has been converted into their specific inches and height. Okay, we didn't have to put in our width and height before. Okay, after that we have our orientation, which is basically two types, portrait and landscape. We both know what portrait and landscape means. After that we have the number of artboards. The artboards are basically where you create your illustrations on. Okay, if I select two artboards, there will be two artboards, 3, 4, and so on. Let me turn it back to 1. And after that we have the bleed. Now what bleed will do is basically ensure that your background image continues off the page, much like an infinity pool effect, and ensures no white borders are left around the print if one is not desired. Okay, so that is what bleed basically does. It creates an effect so that while printing your document, it will not have any white borders left around on it. Okay, afterwards we have this option which will basically constrain or link all of the top and bottom width. After that we have some advanced options. Now if I click on it, you will see that our advanced options are gone. Now let's click on it again, which is basically these three options over here. first we have the color mode. There are two types of color mode, RGB and CMYK. Okay, so what is CMYK? And what is RGB? Now, this is an important factor because whether you're a designer or getting a design, it's important to know the difference between RGB and CMYK color modes so you can plan and optimize each stage of the design process. That goes beyond just knowing what the letters stand for. Spoiler alert, they are mostly colors, because it's more about knowing which one is best for your project. Depending on where and how the final result is displayed, one color space is always better than the other. Okay, now I'm going to tell you what they mean so that you will never be afraid of these acronyms again. All right, so both RGB and CMYK are modes for mixing colors in a graphic design. As a quick reference, the RGB color mode is best for digital work, while the CMYK is mostly used for printing products. But to fully optimize your design, you need to understand the mechanisms behind RGB and CMYK. So let's dive a little deeper and tell you what first RGB is. RGB stands for red, green, and blue, and it is the color space for digital images. Use the RGB color mode if your design is supposed to be displayed in any kind of screen. Okay? Now, when do you want to use RGB? In the end destination of your design project, if it is a digital screen, use the RGB color mode. That would go anything that involves for computers, smartphones, tablets, TVs, cameras, and etc. Now, turn to RGB if your design project involves web and app designs, including icons, buttons, graphics, branding, including online logos, online ads, social media, images for posts, profile pictures, profile backgrounds, visual content, for example, videos, digital graphics, infographics, photographs for website, social media, or apps. Okay, so after that, now I'll explain to you what CMYK is. Okay, now CMYK stands for cyan, magenta, yellow, and key black. Okay, it is the color space for printed materials. A printing machine creates images by combining CMYK colors to varying degrees with physical ink. This is known as subtractive mixing. All colors start as blank white, and each layer of ink reduces the initial brightness to create the preferred color. When all colors are mixed together, they create pure black. Okay? So when will you use CMYK? Use CMYK for any project design that will be physically printed and not viewed on a screen. Okay, if you need to recreate your design with ink or paint, the CMYK color mode will give you more accurate results. Now turn to CMYK from RGB if your project involves branding, including business cards, stationery, tickets, stickers, signs and storefronts, advertising, merchandise, and essential materials, for example, product packaging, and also restaurant menus. All right. I will also teach you later on how to change your color space in Illustrator, basically how to convert from CMYK to RGB color mode. Okay. Now afterwards, we have the raster effects, which are given to us in 4 options: high, medium, screen, and 36 ppi. Okay, so what is raster effects? This setting determines the resolution for pixel-based effects such as drop shadow, blur, glow, all of the Illustrator effects, and sometimes the 3D effects depending on the artwork you map. If you don't use these kinds of effects, then raster effects and resolutions does not matter. Okay. Now, unlike vectors, which are resolution independent, the output quality of raster images depends upon their resolution. When you're creating a raster image, you need to tell the program how large the pixel should be. That is, how many pixels can fit in an inch. Also, PPI is known as pixels per inch, okay? Now, if you are trying to make raster images for a web page, you only need it to be at least 72 ppi, relatively large pixels, okay? But those for for high resolution print output, they need to be in between 300 to 200 ppi, okay? All right. Now after that, we have the preview mode, which is set to default by default. Now if you click on this option, you will see that we have three types. And we already know the first one. The second one is pixels, and third one is overprint, okay? The preview mode in Illustrator allows you to view the results of your artwork before you commit to a file. This is helpful if you're not sure how your artwork will look like when it is finished, or if you want to make changes before you want to save your file, okay? Alright, let's go ahead and then select a template from here, and now I'll basically explain to you what these menus do in our new document area, okay? So first we have the recent over here, which will show you any recent presets that you have used for your Illustrator software. After that, we have saved, and it will show you the save templates or presets. Then we have mobile. This will basically tell you all the presets that we have for any mobile design, okay? As you can see, we have a couple of designs to choose from, and then we have the web design over here, and it is commonly used for web illustrations, designs, etc. Then we have printing, which will obviously show any resolution for our printing designs and illustrations. And you can see that whenever I go to web, the color mode automatically changes. As you can see, also the raster effects as well. And if I go to print, CMYK comes back. Okay, let's go back to web over here, and now this you can see. Now notice you can see that the resolutions are also written down below clearly. Then we have film and video, and yes, we can also make illustrations for our film and video over here. Okay. Now after film and video, we have art and illustration, and here you can see that we have different amounts of formats and presets for any of them below if you ever need it. Okay, let's go back to web over here, and I want to use at least like this much. It's perfect. Afterwards, now RGB raster effects 72 ppi, and let's create the documents. Now you will only press create after you're done editing your preset details, and if you want to like select any presets from here, you can do that. So let's create it. Okay, now afterwards you'll notice that we get this type of view. All right, so inside Illustrator's home window, we have panels, bars, various tools to choose from and create or manipulate our documents and files. In the view over here, it is basically in a document view in the center, and we have our panel view on the right over here, and our menu bar is right here, and afterwards we have our tool palette on the left, and there are three palette groups on the vertical dock. Okay, now what I'll do right now is, so now I'll explain to you what these properties, layers, and libraries do. Okay, so by default, we know that this is basically our panel view. All right. So in the properties section, you can see that first it says no selection. This is because we don't have it or have any shapes over here. For example, let's say I created a square or a rectangle over here. Now you can see that the properties show me a rectangle, but if I click outside using my selection tool, it will say no selection, and by default it has selected the document. Okay, now over here what I'll do is basically explain to you each of these options. Now you can see that after I've drawn a rectangle over here, it shows me this option. But now let's go back over here. First, in the document we have pixels as the unit of measurement that we are using for our document. Then we have artboards. Now, artboards are basically the spaces in which we will create our illustrations with. And here you can see a single artboard. But now if I go over here and write down 2 artboards and press enter, there, now you can see that there's another artboard over here. All right, as you can clearly see, there are 2 artboards over here now. Okay. And if I select any of the artboard over here, it will show me artboard number 1, artboard number 2, as you can see. Okay. And in order to add more artboards, you can just go to the edit artboard option, and here, as you can see, let me zoom out a bit. Okay, I can't zoom out now, but what I was trying to say is basically here you can edit the way your artboard is placed. For example, we can resize it, like as you can see over here, I have resized it. All right. Okay, and now you can see my rectangles outside. I can also create a new artboard like that. Okay, and if I go back to the original properties over here, you can see that now we have 5 artboards. Now let's go back to edit artboards and delete all the excess artboards that we have. And you can also do that in this property section, just so you know. And let's go forward and go over here and exit for now. And I'll take my rectangle back over here. Okay. Now after doing that, let's go back to properties. Now that we know what edit artboards option does, and here we can also select the transform option in order to make our artboard a bit more editable. Afterwards, we can also name the artboard that we're using. Okay, as you can see clearly, and we can also create a new artboard from here too. Okay, and then in the preset over here, we can select any of these preset artboards over here. As you can clearly see, we can set it to portrait, landscape also. And if you want some quick actions, you can always go to the artboard options where you have more options available to us. And here in the display, we can also put in show center mark and show crosshairs, show video safe areas. And in global, you can also select fade region outside artboard and update while dragging. Okay, and here in these options it will say the artboards, and also press alt plus drag cursor to duplicate the artboard. Now press OK. Now you can see that this is what it does. It shows you the crosshairs, and also it shows you the video safe areas, and also it shows you the center mark like that. All right, so now what I'll do is basically remove that, and that, and press OK. Now we're back to default. All right, so that's all you need to know about the artboard properties. Now let's exit and go back to our normal properties. And here you can see that we have rulers and grids. Now what rulers and grids will basically do is create a ruler over here so that you can take some measurements, as you can clearly see. And you can also select the grid which will match with our ruler to create this view, as you can clearly see. Okay, now what I'd like to tell you here is that we mainly use these options in order to create accurate demonstrations or illustrations. And after that, we have the transparency grid, which will make everything transparent so that you can see how your layout actually looks like over here, and if it is inside our artboard. Let's click outside. Let's go back. And now what I'll do is basically explain to you what guides does. The first over here is to click to hide guides. And now if you do that, it will hide the guides, which will basically help you to, see what tools you're selecting. Let's say I just closed it, and now you can see that when I hover my mouse over it, it still shows me that option. All right, and sometimes the guides over here will show you what the tools do. Okay, afterwards we have this option, which is smart guides. This will help you to show some smart guides or some options to choose from in order to create a better illustration. So let's click that again. Let's undo that. And now what I'd like to do is show you the snap options, okay? And here you can just click to lock guides also for guides. Now let's go back to snap options. What snap option does is basically snap two things together, all right? And here we have snap pixel and also snap grid, all right? Now I'll show you what happens with snap options, all right? Let's zoom out a bit. Now here you can see that this is the rectangle I have, and let's say I have another rectangle or any rectangle like this. All right, let's create it like that. Okay, now if I zoom in over here, and let's say I use the selection tool and I wanted it to snap inside this part. So let me turn this off, and if I select this now and try to snap it in, okay, you'll see that it just snaps in. It does not snap in place that easily. But when I have these snap options on and try to do it, you can see that it is pixel perfect and it snaps on way easier than before. Okay, so it will provide fluidity for you to snap in everything you do. All right. Okay, after the snap options, we have preferences, which will be basically use preview bounds, use scale corners, and use scale strokes and effects. Now, what happens is, let's say I have this use preview bounds option off. What will happen is when I try to make my object smaller, okay, here, let me zoom in. You can see that this is what it looks like. The height is exactly 7 and 6. Let me turn it back to 10. Okay, and let's turn the height to 10 also. And here you can see that without using preview bounds, this is what happens, all right? Now, if the keyboard increment is set to 1 pixel, it shows you basically what pixel this has been added to, okay? Now, what I'll do now is basically select use preview bounds and create another rectangle over here or square. Okay. And what I'll do now is basically make it a rounded corner and then make it small. Now you can see when I make it small, it does not directly turn into a circle. Whereas if I had this off, it will turn into circle. All right. So let's go back over here. And now I would like to talk to you about the scale corners. Now, if I put this option on, you'll notice that when I do this to a rounded corner, it is not scaling the corners and making it into a circle. Okay, now if I select the scale strokes and effects, what will happen is basically, let's do that again. Let's delete this and let's use this one. Okay, now here you can see that I have a 10 pixels by 10 pixels option. Now let's press the heck, man. Let's take another rectangle over here. Okay, and here you can see that I have 10 pixels by 10 pixels. All right, but if I click outside and go over here and change the increment to, let's say, 2, press enter. Now what will happen is we can still see it's 10 pixels, but when we go down, it's still 10 pixels, but it's 4 pixels now. Okay, and you can see that when I turn this rectangle slower, when I turn this rectangle's size into a smaller shape, the size of the borders around it also turns small. All right, But now if I go over here and then deselect this and then make this small as well, now you can see that the rectangle does not change its borders as well. Okay, so I'll actually prefer you turn this off and also this option off. Okay, now afterwards we have document setup and preferences. So document setup is just like before. All right, it will select the picture, it will select the pixels. You can also select the artboard, and then you can also select the grid colors, simulated paper color, preset medium resolution, high resolution, or low. And you can discard white over prints in output. And over here, if we go to type, you can also select a typographer's codes, as you can clearly see. And this is basically the size and position of your superscript, subscript, and small caps. And then if you want to export, you will also select the preserve text editability or appearance over here, and then press OK. Now let's go ahead and select preferences over here. Okay, in preferences, you'll find all the settings that you need to change any of these options individually. First, we have general, where we have a lot of options to choose from. Then, now before you start working in any application, given some thought to the preferences, you have to make sure you know all of them. Okay, now each Adobe application gives you numerous preference options that controls the way the application performs specific actions or reacts in specific situations. Access the Illustrator preference window always by selecting the edit option over here. As you can see, then you can select preferences. Okay, now the preference window controls many panes. Okay, and you can select a specific pane from the preferences submenu, as you can see over here, or use the pop-up menu at the top over here in help. Okay, so now what I'll do is basically show you general over here, in which first we have keyboard increment. Keyboard increment refers to the amount of selected object moves when one of the arrow keys on the keyboard is pressed. After that, we have constraint angle. Constraint angle enables you to change the angle of the X and Y axis. They are horizontal, vertical by default. Enter another degree into one of these text fields to rotate the axis. A positive number moves the rotation angle counterwise, and a negative number moves it in the normal clockwise motion. So always remember, positive number equals to counterclockwise and negative number equals to clockwise. And then we have the corner radius, which refers to the corner appearance when the rounded rectangles are drawn. Okay? Over here we have the disable auto add / delete option, which will disable this automatic function. Then we have precise cursors, which will basically help you to turn on an option that gives you very precise pointer when you're working with the tools in the toolbox. The precise cursors help you accurate your work in a very detailed way. All right, then we have show tooltips, and you know that tooltips are shown every time we hover our mouse over our tools over here on the left side on our tool panel, and you can uncheck this option if you do not want to display the name of a tool when you hover your mouse over it. Okay, then we have show rich tooltips, which are the same as this. Then we have show / hide rulers. This will basically show what your rulers are gonna do, and we already know what rulers did over here. Okay, you can turn it on by default or you can turn it off. After that, we have the anti-aliased artwork, which will basically display your vector artwork much smoother than is usually possible on a monitor, giving you a more precise view of how you want it to be printed. All right, then we have select same tint percentage, which will show you the select same menu commands in Illustrator enables you to select all objects that have the same fill or stroke color. When this box is checked, these commands will select only those objects that have the same tint percentage or any of the given colors. Alright, then we have show the home screen when no documents are opened. You already know what this does. Then we have use legacy file new interface. Okay, now what this option actually does is basically, for example, if you ever received a file from a coworker or client, whatever it was, if the file was older than the Illustrator version you're currently using, Illustrator calls this kind of documents legacy files. And when you try to save via file save, this kind of file after you made changes to it, you will receive this error if you uncheck or check this, okay? So now, after that, we have display print size at 100% zoom, all right? So what this does is basically print your document at 100% zoom, okay? If you uncheck this, it will not do it. After that, we have append, which is basically converted upon opening legacy files. This will help you to open previous versions of legacy files and convert them. All right, then we have show system compatibility issues at startup. If you uncheck this, it will not show you. Then we have enable or force enable pinch to zoom on touchpad. This is for touchpad users only. All right, then we have double click to isolate. It will help you to select your corners of your corners or any side of your shape or line as you fit over here. Okay, this is basically, it does the work of an direct selection tool over here. Instead of like shifting to the direct selection tool and clicking on it, you can just double click it with the selection tool and then isolate it. Then we have use Japanese crop marks. You can enable it for Japanese crop marks. Then we have transform pattern tiles, scale corners, and we already know what these two do. Okay, then we have enable content aware defaults, honor scale on PDF format, zoom with mouse wheel. Okay, we can select that as on. I would like to zoom, yes. And afterwards we have use preview bounds. We already know what that does. And then afterwards we have use preview bounds. We already know what that does. And trackpad gesture to rotate view. This will only work with laptops. Okay. Now after that we have reset all warning dialogues and reset preferences, which will always reset all the changes that we have done into our preferences. Okay. After that we have selection and anchor display. Okay, here you can see that what it does is basically, and then after that we have the tolerance of our selection and snap to point, which is 2 pixels. Okay, I will skip this parts over here because we don't have enough time for this video. Next we have anchor points, handle, and bound box display. This will help you to fix the anchor points and handles in your Illustrator. Okay, now here this is the handle style. You can either put it to these two styles. Okay, after that we have highlight anchors as you move over it with a mouse, show handles when multiple anchors are selected. Let me just select this, and then hide corner widget for angles greater than 177 degrees. Okay, then we have enable rubber band for pen tool and curvature tool. After that we have type, which will basically help us in typing anything in our Adobe Illustrator software. Okay, then we have language options and multiple options to choose from over here. After that we have units, and we already know what units do. Here we have general, and then points over, and then we have general, which is for every one of these. If I select points, everything will be points, as you can see. Let's go back to pixels, and here our strokes can also be pixels. Our type will be points or pixels or inches or millimeters. Okay, and afterwards we have identify objects by object name or XML ID. This is basically the ID that our Illustrator software uses. Then we have guides and grids. And here you can see that the guides will be in a different color and styles lines. Okay, then grid, here you can create a custom color for them and then style in lines or dots. And afterwards, grid line every 72 pixels, subdivisions 8. Smart guides, just like before, we have seen in the property over here. Okay, display options, smart guides is in magenta. Display options, object guides over here are in magenta. Glyph guides over here are in custom green. Alignment guides, anchor path labels, object highlighting, measurement labels, transform tools, and spacing guidelines. Okay. After that, we have construction guidelines, which will be at 90 degrees and 45 degrees. We can also add more degrees over here. Okay, then we have construction guides over here, which will choose the angles that we are making for our lines using the line tool. Maximum, you can choose upon 2 angles, and over here you can see you have 60 degrees and horizontal angles and all of the angles over here. All right. Now, if I click on this, you can see that it will use it, but if I don't, it will not. Okay. All right. Afterwards, what we will do is basically go over here on slices. Now, slices will basically help you using the slice tool, and whenever you've created a slice, it will show you the numbers using this option, and it will show you the color of the slice using this color. Okay, and this is basically the shape of the slice or the border of the slice that you have done. And then we have hyphenation, plugins, and scratch disks. User interface, which will show you the brightness. As you can see, if I select this, this is what happens. Select dark. Let's go back to gray over here. And then in canvas color, we can match brightness, select white. Or in share button, we can match brightness and select blue. We can also auto collapse iconic panels, open documents as tabs, large tabs, UI scaling from small to large. As you can clearly see, this is what will happen. Okay. Afterwards, we have scale cursor proportionately, as you can see. Then we have scroll buttons at ends or together. Okay, if I select together, you'll see that the scale buttons or scroll buttons are together. Okay, and these changes will take the next time we start Illustrator. And performance, we will see that this is what happens. If you have a GPU, it will select the GPU performance and an animated zoom. Okay, and then here it will tell you your GPU details. Afterwards, let's go to file handling, where you can select the location where you want to save your file, or basically automatically save recovery data every 2 or 30 seconds or hours. Okay. After that, we have files, where we will optimize file open and file save time on slow networks, lower resolution proxy for linked EPS, and display bitmaps as anti-aliased images in pixel preview. Then we have use system defaults for edit original, and then fonts, we can auto activate Adobe fonts. Okay. Then we have clipboard handling, and on copy we can include SGV code, PDF, AICB, no transparency support. Just make sure you know that. If I select this, we have 2 options: preserve paths, preserve appearance and overprints. Let's deselect it because I do not want that. And when pasting, paste without text formatting, as you can see. All right. Then we have appearance of black. Here we can select the options for black on RGB and grayscale devices. Then we have devices, which will either say enable Wacom or not. Okay, let's press OK, and now we are back over here. All right. Now, what I'll do is basically go to the menu option over here so that you can understand what they do. First, we have the file option on our menu, which will show you some options to create some new files. Close it, close all if you have opened multiple documents over here. Save, save as, and then we have save as template, export scripts, document setup, document color mode, and you can see that we can change it over here too. And then we have file info, print, exit. In edit, we have multiple options to choose from in order to edit our document. Okay. Now here we can either paste, copy, cut, redo, and you can see that every option over here has their significant shortcut. Okay, then we have find and replace, spelling, edit custom dictionary, edit colors, transparency flattener presets, print, Adobe PDF, perspective, grid presets. Okay, you can select any of these things if you want to select a preset from. Color settings, assign profile, keyboard shortcuts, my settings, and I already showed you preferences. After that, we have object, where you can select any of these options from in order to select it or either edit it. Then afterwards, we have type, from where we can select the options regarding our text. Then we have select, okay, where we can select our inverse, select every object in our Illustrator artboard. After that, we have FX, where we can apply effects from either Illustrator effects or Photoshop effects. And here we can also go to the document raster effects settings. And here you can see that this is our resolution now. Background white, transparent, options anti-alias, clipping mask, etc. Okay, after that we have view. Here we can also go to presentation mode, screen mode. We can select these options. Now let's select full screen mode with menu bar, and now you can see that this is what happens. Let's go back to screen mode and let's select normal screen mode, and we are back. Okay, after that, here we can also create a new window, and then we have different types of Windows option over here to choose from. All right, as you can clearly see. Then we have help, where we can also sign in and get updates on Illustrator. Okay,